Good evening, I'm Kelly Wright. Welcome to tonight's program. We'll get right to it tonight. Here are my opening observations. Today, the Justice Department has announced that it is assessing all of the evidence involving the shooting death of 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery in Brunswick, Georgia. The department is trying to determine if federal hate crime charges are appropriate in this case. Now, throughout the country, several political and community leaders have likened this senseless act of violence against a Black man by two armed white men as a lynching. You'll recall that Ahmaud Arbery was shot on February 23rd. The evidence of that didn't surface until a disturbing video, showed what happened. And now we're looking at the possibility of a grand jury that will convene in June once we get through the COVID-19 pandemic. But here's the thing. Gregory McMichael, 64, a member of the law enforcement community, and his son, Travis McMichael, 34, are now charged with aggravated assault and murder. They were arrested on Thursday for opening fire on this 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery, a young, unarmed Black man known for his playing days of high school football, running through Brunswick, Georgia, jogging, and now he's dead. He would have turned 26 on Friday, this past Friday. And yesterday, Mother's Day, his mother, of course, is without a son. And that is heartbreaking. And those are my opening observations. So we've got a lot to talk about in today's program. And my first guest is our legal analyst, Terry Austin. She's based in New York City, but she has been following closely the case in Georgia, Brunswick, Georgia to be exact, where the young 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery was gunned down in February by two white assailants. And Terry, this case is really taking on a lot of attention, as it should. But the two white assailants were arrested, as you know, on Friday, George and Travis McMichaels. And they are a father and son team. And Mr. McMichaels, the 64-year-old, had served on law enforcement. The entire general feeling from this case is that something was amiss within the department down there, why a prosecutor would recuse himself and not follow through to arrest these two men on suspicion of murder immediately.
I agree. They really should have followed up back when this happened several months ago, and instead two prosecutors in a row recused themselves. And the reason was, they said that because the father worked in the system, he was an investigator at one point, and so there could have been some bias. And maybe that was the right action to take, but it should have been immediate, and it should have been immediately reassigned to a prosecutor who doesn't have any sort of conflicts of interest. So now we finally have a prosecutor who has come into the case, and soon after the video was shown, he now has said that he will pursue these arrests, obviously, and finally we see that there is some action being taken, but it's taken too long, and justice prolonged is justice denied. And in this case, I am really hoping that they get to the heart of the matter here. It's really troubling.
Yeah, and the heart of the matter we want to get to, but I did misspoke earlier that I said that they were arrested on Friday, or actually arrested Thursday night, as soon as that new prosecutor and the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, got involved in the case and saw the video. So to the heart of the matter, Terry, is really the intent that these two men had in chasing down Ahmaud Arbery on some suspicion that he was burglarizing new homes in the area when he was actually out for a jog. And what kind of defense is that to even try to make a citizen's arrest based on seeing a man jogging?
Well, under Georgia law, you can make a citizen's arrest, but there are some parameters for that. You can't just go out and arrest someone or shoot someone. And the parameters say that you either have to have witnessed the crime or have immediate knowledge of the crime. And what they will probably claim is they thought that Ahmed was a robber in a territory and in their neighborhood, and they thought they needed to apprehend him. And as you mentioned, he was simply jogging down the street in his own neighborhood. And so it is really a defense, I think, that should not prevail, because they didn't have the right to arrest him, and certainly they did not have the right to kill him. They do have the right in Georgia to carry a weapon as long as it's not concealed, but they used this weapon, they attacked him, and they killed him. And clearly, that is not what should be intended under the law, even under Georgia law, which I think, frankly, goes a bit too far with the arrest for the citizens' rights.
Absolutely. As you know, there is video that has now surfaced that shows Ahmed stopping, looking at a home that was under construction, and he walked through it. And I mean, I recall going to new home sites. Hey, look at this house. This is a nice house. Let me check it out. And then he went on with his job. He never took anything. And it just really is unconscionable to think that these two men would chase him down and then have the results ending in young Ahmad's death, who, by the way, would have turned 26 this past week, I believe on Mother's Day. So we have this terrible, outrageous misfortune to a young African American man at the hands of two white men. And then, Terry, there's the third person who took the video of the actual shooting.
Yes.
Is he complicit in this as well?
Absolutely, he is complicit in this. So he was involved because, based on the reports that I've seen, he was one of the individuals who they summoned to come and to try to entrap him, basically, and to stop the individual from running on the street. So they needed two cars, and he was recording it behind them. So he could absolutely be charged with the crime here. And although he didn't pull the trigger, and although he didn't get involved in the altercation, there's an argument when you look at the video that he's trying to corner Ahmad, and he's clearly not helping Ahmad, who's getting shot. He's recording the whole event. So I do think that at some point he should be at least a person of interest. They should investigate what was his involvement, what did he know about Ahmad and about him jogging, and about the incident that you mentioned. There is video for him going into the home. And it's interesting, Kelly, because I'm a jogger too.
Mhm.
And I absolutely stop and I look at things. And if there's an open house or flowers by the side of the road, you stop and you look at things. You have an absolute right. He was not trespassing. He did not steal anything. And so for anyone to claim that they were trying to apprehend him because he committed some sort of crime or they witnessed a crime is just going to fall through the cracks. I believe it's going to show that they clearly had no right to chase him down and to kill him ultimately. And the mother must be, the whole family must be really distraught, because it did happen so close to his birthday and so close to Mother's Day. And no matter when this kind of thing happens, it's distressing to say the least. And it seems as though it's never going to stop. I mean, you go all the way back to Trayvon Martin, and there's so many cases that we know about here in the United States where this kind of thing is happening, and it's very distressing.
Terry Austin, our legal analyst here on the program, and Terry, we thank you. A lot of work to be done legally, as well as fighting the injustice that has been taking place. But we thank you for being on the program. Come back anytime to keep us updated on what's happening legally.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It's always a pleasure to be on your show, and God bless.
Thank you. God bless you too. Back with more of the program after this. Welcome back to the program. Joining me now is Dr. Benjamin Chavis, who is the president and CEO of NNPA Black Press USA. And Doc, it's good to have you. I thought I would bring you on because you represent a large consortium of newspapers that reach 20 million readers. And certainly top of mind right now is not only the coronavirus, but what happened in Brunswick, Georgia, with regard to the loss of life of Ahmaud Arbery. We've been talking in previous segments to Terry Austin, our legal analyst, as well as Philadelphia Police Lieutenant Jonathan Josie, and none of them can see any justification or even provocation for this kind of heinous crime inflicted on another unarmed Black man. What is the Black press doing and talking about in terms of this unfortunate demise of Ahmaud Arbery?
Amidst this pandemic, amidst the state of emergency in Black America, we find that these incidents of racially motivated violence continue unabated. Where is the United States Department of Justice? Kelly, when was the last time that you've seen the Department of Justice deploy agents to solve racial justice matters? There's an absence. And so what Black communities are left in large part to fend for themselves. So we're working with the NAACP, we're working with the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights, the Legal Defense Fund of the NAACP, and other groups, American Civil Liberties Union, all legal groups, as well as the National Bar Association. When the National Bar Association meets this summer in virtual, they're going to be discussing this. And of course, the National Newspaper Publishers Association, we're going to have a virtual conference this summer, and we're going to also be discussing it. But every day, we not only collect the data of these incidents, but we deal with the families. Here it was now on Mother's Day yesterday. Ahmaud's mother had her saddest Mother's Day ever because her son was brutally lynched, as Ahmaud's father would say. He was lynched. That was this time it wasn't with a rope, it was with rifles and shotguns and pistols. But he was lynched while jogging. And I think that it's an outrage, not only for Black America, but I would say this, Kelly, it should be an outrage for white America. It should be an outrage for all Americans. As you've quoted in your previous shows, Dr. King said that a threat to justice anywhere, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That was his quote. And I think that certainly the threat to racial justice in Brunswick, Georgia, affects Black Americans all over the country, but it also affects all Americans.
To your point, we have a guest who's coming up following my discussion with you, Dr. Joseph Castleberry, who, by the way, is the president of Northwest University. That's a small Christian college, one of the top in the country. And they're based outside of Seattle, Washington, in Kirkland. And they have put together a statement of sharing the grief that they feel with regard to this shooting, this killing of Ahmaud Arbery. And they are speaking out against this. And this is a predominantly white university. Nevertheless, they're stepping out to actually state something that I think other colleges and even other institutions, faith-based, what have you, should be stepping out to state state with specific specificity that this is a case that must be dealt with and must not be swept under the rug.
Well, it's a good thing that that college is making a statement and speaking out. I wish more, the college that you're referring to, university, they come out of the evangelical movement. And of course, we need more evangelicals, we need more mainstream Protestants, we need Catholics, we need people from the Jewish tradition, people from the Islamic tradition. We need all religious leaders to speak out against racial violence. We need all religious leaders to speak out against racial hatred. And educational institutions like the university that you've cited, I hope that other universities will follow them in their outspokenness on this issue.
Dr. Benjamin Chavis, thank you for being part of the program. And we'll continue on coming up next. We'll talk to that gentleman I was just talking about, Dr. Joseph Castleberry, president of Northwest College, and we'll hear what he has to say. And I think in large part, Dr. Chavis, we will agree with the statement that he's making to basically state that this practice of racial violence must end and end quickly.
Thank you very much. Let me know his statement because we will publish it in the Black press.
You got it. Thank you. Back with more of the program after this. Welcome back to the program. So my next guest wrote this. He's the president of university. Let me read the statement to you, and then I'll introduce him. It says, quote, "This senseless, unjustifiable killing of Ahmaud Arbery, an innocent Black man in Georgia, has shocked the conscience of millions across America in recent days, across the lines of religion, politics, race, ethnicity, class, and other differences. Americans are grieving over this deplorable slaughter. As evangelical Christians who follow Jesus Christ and love for all people of all nations, peoples, tongues, and tribes, we want to express our grief over this interracial violence and all expressions of hate." That, of course, is written by the board of directors of Northwest University in Kirkland, Washington. And joining me now is the president of that fine institution, Dr. Joseph Castleberry. Good of you to join us today, sir. And this is a remarkable statement from your university.
Well, thank you, Kelly. It's this is a terrible, terrible loss to our country. It's really a grievous thing. And our community here at the university wanted to stand in solidarity with African Americans, especially in this grief. And this case is just especially egregious. And I just didn't feel like we could remain silent. My board of directors, 32 people on our board, they agreed with us. And so we've issued this statement, and so far hundreds of people have signed on to it here in our community. And people from around the country are finding out about it, and they're signing on too. So, you know, our motivation here is just to tell the African-American community that we care about this, that this touches us deeply. Injustice to anyone is injustice to everyone. And we just can't sit by silently and not make our voice heard, even if it's just an expression of shared grief.
Well, we appreciate that. I certainly appreciate you coming on the program to talk about this. And it makes me really, I find it to be heartwarming and encouraging that academic institutions like Northwest University, which is an evangelical school, is now putting the gauntlet out for other evangelicals to come forward as well to speak out against this type of injustice and racial violence that we've seen too much of in this country.
Yeah. One of the things I'm happy about is that we, a group of pastors here in Seattle has adopted our letter and has changed it a bit, actually taken it up a notch. And we're getting signatures for that letter now, and we're planning to take out a full-page ad in the Seattle Times, hopefully later this week, so that we as pastors can make our voice heard and not stand by on this.
Dr. Castleberry, the message from you is heartfelt. And many people on my program have stated that we have to stand up against injustice. We have to stand up against racial violence. And yet many of them who have been African-American community leaders have stated until we see white America do the same thing and we stand together, we may not see an end to this kind of racial hatred that goes on in our country. And so I have to applaud you and the university, as well as those pastors in Seattle who are on the West Coast looking at something that took place on the East Coast in Brunswick, Georgia, and yet it's awakened you. And perhaps it was always there, but now you're voicing it. And I think it means a lot to finding good dialogue on how we find healing for our nation. Well,
that's exactly the point, Kelly. We are divided at a level that could take us down as a nation. And, we're facing a global pandemic. We're facing an economic collapse. We've got serious, serious problems. And these interracial issues that we have been unable to solve, they fit into the narrative of division in our country. We've got to pull together, and anything we can come together around and find some common ground and begin to struggle for a better future together as a people. We've got to grab it, and this one to me seemed like a no-brainer. This case is one that I would think most people, looking at the facts, if they'll look at the facts, they'll see that every American should grieve this loss.
I'm talking to Dr. Joseph Castleberry. He is the president of Northwest University in Kirkland, Washington. We'll be back with more of my interview with him after this. Welcome back to the program, where I'm continuing now my conversation with Dr. Joseph Castleberry, the president of Northwest University. Well, I tell you what you're saying. I hope the White House is watching and listening to what you're saying. I hope they will watch what the pastors in Seattle are saying and doing as they stand up against this kind of racial violence. But also, I know you personally, and I know that your background is such that your heart has been open to everyone from every spectrum, all nationalities, all races, all creeds. And for the sake of our viewers, give us your background and how you went on to do what was remarkable. And many people would have said, I would have never thought that you would have become the kind of person that you are today.
Well, Kelly, I grew up in small town in Alabama during the Civil Rights Movement. I was born in 1960, and Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s work shook our community profoundly. I was from a family, a typical white Southern family at the time, and I was on the wrong side of the issue, even as a small child. I remember being 7 years old, going door to door with the petition, trying to stop school segregation. My community, my town fought against it until 1968, believe it or not. Didn't integrate the schools till 1969. And I was a racially prejudiced child in Alabama. And I just thank God for Dr. King's prophetic ministry to our country, and for calling us to a better reality, a better state. And as I grew older, I had the first contradiction of that sort of racist agenda when I was in the 4th grade, and a black kid named Eugene saved me on the playground from some white bullies, and he threw them off of me and saved me from getting a beating. And we were best friends for the rest of the day, and then always after that, good friends. And it began to change my heart. As I grew older, I realized what a horrible sin racism was. And I then moved off to New Jersey and learned to love immigrants, and wound up being a missionary to Latin America. I got to live in Spanish for 20 years of my life, and continue to be very involved with the Latino community. Of course, wrote a book on immigration a few years ago, The New Pilgrims, and really learned to love people of every kind. And people are beautiful. People are God's creation. God loves them. And if you can't see a way to love people, I mean all of them, if you can't see a way to love people, you're missing something that God sees. And it's really an insult to God as the maker of all human beings not to love everyone, He's created. So this is expression of that God's teaching us all to love each other.
Dr. Castleberry, I appreciate you, man. I really do. You make me, in full disclosure, my honorary doctorate was conferred upon me by you there at Northwest University. You asked me to give a commencement speech, and then you surprised me with that wonderful gift. And I am just so proud of what the institution is doing, what you're doing as a leader, a thought leader in this country. And I think what the university is doing, and the pastors in Seattle will have some positive reverberations across this country, because it is time that white Americans like yourself and Black Americans, all of us, come together, because we have to stop this kind of racial violence and racial hatred. It will disintegrate our country if we do not stand in the gap and pray and come together and act on it. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you for being such a believable and faithful media voice for good news and for a news that builds our country.
Can't wait to see you again in the flesh, but thank you for being on the program, and we'll continue to follow the developments. Let us know when the pastors in Seattle finally put that before the Seattle Times. We'd be more than happy to have a couple of you on. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Kelly.
All right, back with more of the program after this. Welcome back to the program. So I'm talking now to Lieutenant Jonathan Josie about the case that took place in Brunswick, Georgia. Now, Lieutenant Josie is also a member of the Philadelphia Police Force. He is head of the criminal division there. And Lieutenant, I know you wanted to weigh in on what you saw taking place on that videotape in Brunswick, Georgia. Two white men, one a former member of law enforcement there in the area, and his son, committing what can only be described as a heinous act against an innocent man who we saw jogging. How do you perceive this case as a member of law enforcement?
It's going to have some significant impact on that. And as a member of law enforcement, I've been in law enforcement for almost 30 years. When I first saw the video of the young man jogging, and since then, of course, the other video has surfaced of him inspecting a house that was under construction. And so many people have come forward trying to validate the McMichael's actions based on that, which I think is flawed in and of itself. I was appalled when I saw the first video. As a Black man, I was cut deep, because when things like this happen, it impacts us and it takes us back, and we regress to when in the South we were killed arbitrarily, and this was a modern day lynching, in my opinion.
I'm at a loss of words because I'm heartbroken by seeing this. I have sons, I have a daughter, and any man who is Black, I think, would look at that and be not only outraged, but also shaken in terms of what's next. We're going through this pandemic, and we're seeing it adversely impact our African-American community and other communities of color. We have disparities that we're already dealing with. And now we're seeing another case of what really appears to be racial bias and a racial hate crime committed against another young Black man.
And I understand, and I feel the same way you do. I'm heartbroken as well, because that could have happened to me. I have friends that live in Georgia. I have friends that live in the South, or just period, just thinking, being a Black man in this country in 2020, that you have to be concerned about jogging through a neighborhood or being stopped and shot for just simply being Black or being at the wrong place at the wrong time. And what I've been coming up against is, I've had people come to me, or, white people had actually said, well, what about Black on Black crime? Nobody cares about that. Nobody, it's only an issue when a white man kills a Black man. We are very, very cognizant of what's going on in our communities, and we are aware of the socioeconomic implications that cause our communities to be in strife, that are contributors to those types of incidents. But like I stated earlier, when things like this happen, it cuts deep, because of the generational connection to, Jim Crow, the generational connection to the African-American community, or Blacks being the most oppressed ethnicity in this country from the time this country started. So it actually, the impact of that, it can't really be expressed in words of how it feels to see that happen, and to see it happen on video, and for the judicial system to take so long to ponder over this incident? Had the incident gone the other way, would they have taken so long to have, levied sanctions against the individual involved? And that's a question that we always have to be mindful of, and we always have to keep in the back of our mind.
And that's why we're talking about this. We have to keep making it very clear that this is a case that must be dealt with justice and not any hint of injustice. We've seen it happen in the past. And in this particular case, there has to be a lot of pressure brought to bear on not only the GBI, but the federal government in terms of the Department of Justice. And that's why we're talking about this. This is a case that we cannot allow to be swept under the rug or nullified in a court of law. It has to be dealt with all due speed. And I know we're waiting until June before the grand jury. And so all eyes will be watching this case.
Absolutely. And this is something that we must truly monitor consistently. And we have to put forth effort to continue to speak out on it, because these injustices happen all of the time. All of them aren't caught on video. All of them aren't as publicized as Ahmaud Arbery. But we have to be mindful that, in this climate, this hate-driven climate, and we understand sometimes why this divisiveness exists in this country, because we have a president who is somewhat reckless in his rhetoric, and that emboldens and empowers some people. So we really, really have to be careful. We really have to pay attention to this. And I am prayerful that the Department of Justice monitors this and stays on top of it. And, they have to be very, very strategic in how this is done in order for justice to be served. But we'll see how this plays out.
All right, Lieutenant Jonathan Josie, keep us up to date on things that are happening in Philly as well. I know you're doing a lot of work to help people get through the coronavirus pandemic, but we thank you for weighing in on this issue, and we'll continue to follow the developments of this unfortunate case. And the sad part is that a mother is without her child for a senseless act of violence. Coming back with more on the Kelly Wright Show right after this. Welcome back to the program. So now it's time for Strengthening the Family. And as you know, this is something we've been doing every day here on the show. Why? Because we realize that as families go through the COVID-19 pandemic and all the myriad of problems that already face a family, it's important that we drill down on the topic of how we keep our families strong. So joining me now are my good friends, George and Tondra Gregory. George and Tondra, by the way, created Journey for Life to help couples to be proactive about building healthy relationships and winning in marriage. Therefore, guys, if the family wins, it's because the married partners figured it out and found a way to win and make the family strong. Welcome to the show again today.
Thank you.
Thank you. We were really so excited to be here. We always look forward to being with you and your listeners.
I'm delighted to have you both. Tondra, let me begin with you. It's important to maintain peace in the family, and yet peace is sometimes an impossible dream, especially when you compound it with the issues that confront a family due to this pandemic we're going through. Yeah. Tell me some strategies, if you will, how we can learn to maintain peace through this difficult time.
Yes, one way to maintain peace is that we have to walk in patience, right? And to walk in patience is to exercise self-control. I love that scripture in Galatians that talks about the fruit of the Spirit, right? Where it's kindness, gentleness, and it goes through a list, long-suffering, all those things. And that last fruit of the Spirit is self-control. So in order to have that sense of peace is to have that self-control, right? Like we don't want to be reacting to every frustration that we experience in our home. We want to be centered and anchored in that sense of self-control and peace, right? Self-control is like a sign of maturity, meaning, you wouldn't expect a 2-year-old to have the same level of self-control that a 50-year-old would have, right? So as we're maturing, we get more control over our actions and our reactions, right? So that's one important thing that I feel is crucial in maintaining peace, is don't let everything trigger you and set you off, right? That's key.
Yeah, I mean, living in close quarters, especially during this COVID-19, you're bound to be triggered, right? Our triggers have triggers.
Yeah.
But there's a saying that you control what you can control. Here in this matter, you have to control yourself, or yourself will control you.
Mm-hmm.
And when we don't control our lips, our mouth, our actions, we can get into a lot of trouble. So during these times, we've got to police ourselves. We've got to be critical about what we say. We got to be critical not to say everything we think. We got to think and say those things that we know are going to be honoring and lifting. And sometimes I just think we're a glutton to our mouths. We just want to not only feed our mouths anything our mouths want, but we let come out of our mouth anything we think. And during this season, we just need to think about how to maintain that peace.
So how do you come together collectively as a family? You know, do you have family time where you can sit down? Hey, how was your day today? Let's talk about things. Let's get things out in the open. How are you being impacted by your job if you're working from home? Or how are you dealing with this new normal that's abnormal because I'm not working? Yeah, it's just a whole lot of things to juggle. The bills, and then if you've got children, that's a whole new situation too, because the kids are at home. You don't have a break from them. They're at home.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah. And sometimes, listen, I'm bald, and sometimes my kids make me want to pull the rest of my hair out. But we've got to, we're in this for the long haul, right? Marriage is the name of our organization is called Journey for Life, right? Yeah. We believe marriage is a journey. It should be for life. And so this is for the long haul. COVID-19 is going to come and it's going to pass. Mm-hmm. Right? Our marriages were built to last. It's built off covenant. Most people don't realize that when you go before a priest or a pastor and you say those vows, that you're saying before God and before everyone who's in attendance, this is what we vow to do. Yes. And so regardless, peace in the home is one of those vows that you've made.
Yeah. And I always like to say, peace in the home is first having that peace in your heart, right? So we do want to just take that time to self-care. I know we use that term a lot, but self-care is basically being aware of yourself and how you're feeling and what your needs are, and being proactive about addressing those things versus reactive. I always say reflect before you react, right? We don't want to have an automatic reaction to things. We want to calm down. We want to take deep breaths so that we can think about what is missing right here. What am I needing in this moment? And so I just think that's key. And then another point is just that, listen, we have to realize that no one's perfect, right? So we can put a lot of pressure on our spouse because we become hyper focused on what's going wrong or what they're not doing, and we can just dwell on that to a place that can cause a incongruency in our marriage, right? And that is how you start to kind of, when you get out of sync, that's when you're just reacting and you're losing your sense of peace and self-control in those moments. So making sure you're aware of it.
I'm smiling while my wife's talking about this, because many of your viewers probably think, wow, you guys have the perfect marriage. And we like to think that we do, but we toss it up too, right? We have what we call intense fellowship. Yes. That's code word for fights. Yes. Every now and then, even the professionals, it's bound to happen.
Yes.
And yet we've got a key buzzword in our home that instead of calling a timeout, because when we get heated, we need a quick timeout in a football term, right, or a sports term. But for us as believers, we what we say to each other is we say, "You're not my enemy,"
Right.
and that's our buzzword. That means when one of us says, "You're not my enemy," that means it should snap us back into it. That when we're intense or when we're going at it, that we're on the same team. That hey, what I said, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings or for you to globalize it, but you are not my enemy. Now, where do we get that from? We get that from a biblical passage. Ephesians chapter 6, where it says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and wickedness in high places. And there's moments that you and your spouse are probably having intense fellowship like we do. And you've just got to look around and say, you know what? We don't even know why we're arguing anymore. We don't know why we're tossing it up. We don't even know what the main thing was. And yet you better believe that the enemy of your soul is trying to get you off course.
Yeah.
And so what we say is, you're not my enemy. And maybe that could be your buzzword. You're not my enemy. Say that to your husband sometimes. We're on the same team. You're not my enemy.
Yeah.
George and Tandra, thank you. And you're not my enemy.
Yeah.
You are my friends. I appreciate you being on the program. And when you come back on Wednesday, we'll talk about what's happening out here in this new normal as it relates to people getting married, or at least trying to get married, when all of their plans are just blown out the window, just blowing up because of social distancing and physical distancing. It's kind of problematic when you can't go and have your wedding plans completed because of this disruption. We'll talk about that on Wednesday, but thank you for being here today. And I've been talking to George and Tandra Gregory, Journey for Life, and NFL chaplains to the Los Angeles Chargers. Thanks for being on the show, guys. Back
Thank
with more
you
of the
for having
program
us.
after this. Welcome back, and now for my final word. As we've seen at the top of this program, there are many people who are decrying what happened in Brunswick, Georgia, as well they should. And they're reminding us of a statement that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. made. Injustice tolerated anywhere is injustice everywhere. Something is going to be done about this case. We will continue to sound the alarm. We will continue to make it known that this case is not only under the microscope of African Americans, but people are also looking at it through the lens of their conscience now, so that a right can be made of a wrong that should have never been inflicted on a young, unarmed Black man. Hopefully tonight you've been righted, ignited, and united to keep spreading love, freedom, and peace, even in the midst of hate. Good night.
Don't let the color of my skin come between me and you, my friend. My thing is love. My thing is freedom. My thing is peace, y'all. What's your thing? Love, freedom, and peace.